Betsy, you can go ahead.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's quarterly town hall with Dr. Neal Barnard, President of Physicians Committee. My name is Betsy Wasson, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's event. And we're excited to have you join us, and we'll begin in just a moment. Tonight, we'll be discussing our campaigns, and we'll be answering your questions live. But before we begin, a few quick points to make. Right now, we're in the process of dialing out to thousands of our members, so please just stay on the line, and we'll hear from Dr. Neal Barnard and Ryan Merkley, our Associate Director of Research Policy, shortly. Also, we want to hear from you tonight, and if you would like to ask a question, please press 0 on your phone anytime during the call, and you'll be connected directly with one of our staff members. So again, press 0 anytime during the call to ask a question. So if you've just joined us, good evening and welcome to tonight's town hall with Dr. Neal Barnard, President of Physicians Committee. So I'm Betsy Wasson, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. These quarterly conference calls are a benefit for our Guardian Circle members and our lifetime partners. It's your support that's making this groundbreaking work possible, and we are so glad that you're here on the call with us tonight to learn more about this work. If you would like to ask a question at any time during the call, please press 0, and you'll be connected to one of our staff members. And now, without further delay, let me introduce the President of Physicians Committee, Dr. Neal Barnard.
Well, thank you, Betsy, and thanks to everybody for being with us. I'm delighted you could be with us on the call. It's your support that makes all of our work possible. And what I would like to do before we go further is to bring in our Associate Director for Research Policy, Ryan Merkley, who has a very unenviable job. He has to tackle the use of animals in laboratory research. And as all of you know, when animals are used in laboratories, they are often put through really horrific experiences even before the experiments begin. I'm talking about being shipped in, caged, and often left in isolation for long periods of time. Then they are experimented on and killed. And that's what Ryan and his team have to tackle. He's got an update on a couple of our really important programs, and I'd like to bring Ryan into the call. Ryan Merkley, Associate Director of Research Policy for the Physicians Committee. Ryan, are you there?
Yes, great. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I wanted to update you about a couple of our campaigns, which no doubt you've heard a lot about already, and we're continuing to work hard on. One of them is the Johns Hopkins University's use of animals to teach medical students. The other is some dog experiments going on at Wayne State University. Let me start with Johns Hopkins. As many of you probably have heard and know, at this university in Baltimore, they use live pigs to teach basic surgical skills to medical students. They're one of only 4 medical schools in the entire country that do this. The other 3 are the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga, the University of Mississippi, and the Rush Medical College in Chicago. But there's absolutely no need to do this. 98% of medical schools don't do it, and thanks to PCRM's work over the years, many have stopped. So we talked with the school for a little while behind the scenes, trying to get them to stop this. And earlier this year, the school's Vice Dean of Education announced publicly that the pig lab, the animal lab, would continue. And what he said in defense of it was that he believes it teaches the sanctity of life to medical students. Well, most physicians would argue at that point. We think there's no need to kill animals to teach the sanctity of life, and in fact, it does the opposite. So we asked a lot of our physician members to chime in, and we got 125 of Maryland physicians to sign a petition that we delivered this summer to Johns Hopkins leaders. And right now, we're working with a Johns Hopkins resident, so this is somebody who's at Hopkins post-medical school, and we're working with him to organize a meet and greet, a discussion with other medical students at the school in the hopes that we can sort of foment some real inroads within the medical school, within the faculty and the administration. We're trying to get medical students to speak out, and this is something that they're asked to with a fair amount of pressure to participate in, and we're trying to get their voices together and get them to speak out. Now, on the other issue I mentioned, Wayne State University, again, many of you have probably heard of this. This is Wayne State University is in Detroit, and for more than 20 years, they've been using dogs in heart failure and hypertension experiments. And what these dogs go through is quite cruel and horrific. Many of them can be subjected up to 7 surgeries, and by the end of it have up to 9 medical devices implanted in each of them. They are forced to run on treadmills, and heart failure and hypertension are induced artificially. And the idea behind this is that we will learn something about heart failure and hypertension, which are major contributors to heart disease, the number one killer in America. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. 2 of our experts, one of them a cardiologist and a fellow of the American College of Cardiology, John Pippin, who's been at PCRM for many years, he and one of our other colleagues, scientists, undertook a thorough scientific review of the experiments. They looked at every single paper that's come out of them. They looked at the detailed experiments, the grants that the federal government has provided to these experiments, and they couldn't find, after more than 2 decades, a single thing that's contributed to helping heart failure or hypertension patients in this country, especially in Michigan, where it's a major killer. So what we've done is we've taken this evidence, and just last month, one of those scientists met with the scientific advisors at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. This is part of the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland, and they've been funding these experiments. So we went to them and we said, look, there's some major problems with the way you're funding these funding basic research in this country. We think you need to refocus it on human-based efforts that are actually going to show improved outcomes for human patients. So this is an ongoing dialogue that's just in earnest started with that specific institute about these experiments, but we'll continue it. And then lastly, we've gotten some help from folks on faculty at Wayne State. One of them is actually a cardiologist. He's a longtime faculty member there. His name is Dr. Joel Kahn, and he authored an op-ed about this issue that appeared in the Detroit News just a few weeks ago. And what Joel said was, these experiments have been going on for more than 2 decades. There's nothing to show for them, and the people of Michigan who have been paying for them and pay for Wayne State University's facilities deserve better. So we're working with him, we're working with a lot of our physician members and trying to push the federal agency that's been funding them away from these experiments.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me remind anybody who's participating in the call, if you have a question or if you have a comment, we'd love to have you join us, and all you do is press 0, and then one of our staff members will be able to take your question. And we'd love to have you as part of the call. So if you have a comment, if you have a question or anything, just press 0 on your phone. You can do it right now, and we'd love to take your comment or your question. While we're waiting for people to raise whatever questions they may have, I want to just make a couple of comments. From day to day, it can get frustrating because you feel like, are we really seeing any progress? But when we look back a little bit, I remember when I was in medical school, one day when I was in the second year of medical school at the George Washington University here in Washington, D.C., I was sitting in the room 101 at Ross Hall, and the instructor said, next week is dog lab. Form your groups of 4 to 6 students and get ready for the lab. And we all knew exactly what that meant. It meant that a dog was going to be brought into the room, hoisted up, put on a table, taped down to the table, given various drugs to show the effect of the drugs on the heart rate or the blood pressure or the pulse. And then the dogs were all going to be killed. And we were supposed to participate in this, let it happen without any kind of protest. And when they announced that this was going to happen, walked up to the front of the room. I said to the instructor, I'm not doing this. And the instructor said, well, it's required. You have to do this. And I said, I am quite certain. I was a little bit of a cocky medical student. I knew I didn't need to do this. I said to the instructor, I am quite sure I can pass this class without killing my first patient, without harming anybody. I didn't want to kill a dog for this. And while I was having this discussion, another student heard what I said. And she said, if he's not doing the lab, I'm not doing the lab. And so at that point, the instructor saw that he had a movement on his hands, and he couldn't fight with me anymore. So he said, oh, all right, okay, you too, but you've got to turn in a report. And so we turned in a report of what the drugs would do, and we passed the course. And before long, that class, instead of being required, became optional. And when we started the Physicians Committee, I decided one of the first things I want to do is to get rid of those darn labs, because if you train medical students on animals, they will believe for their entire careers that killing animals is an essential part of medical progress. And I wanted them to learn just the opposite. If you do not train on animals, you learn that it's not necessary. So the lab that we had at GW, where I went to school, was optional, and then we got rid of it. We were able to stop it completely, and we worked one school at a time over and over and over again. Some of them were pretty easy. We just worked with the instructors. They see the value of alternatives. In other cases, they were tough. The University of Colorado took years. We finally had to bring a lawsuit. There were others like that, too. But we've won school by school, and as Ryan mentioned, we're going to get them. The Johns Hopkins is too good of a medical school to not see the value of the non-animal methods, and I have no doubt that we're going to be able to win this campaign. So let me ask the operator, do we have people who have raised a question or a comment, or otherwise I can go on with some other things?
Hi, it's Betsy, and right now we are still waiting for questions. So just to remind people, anytime during the call, press 0 to leave a comment or ask a question, and you'll be connected to one of our staff members so that we can pull you up live.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. So again, if you've got a question, you've got a comment, just press 0. We would love to take your question. A couple other things I wanted to mention. We had a real watershed moment, in my view. September 3rd, 4th, and 5th, something happened that is just really unprecedented. For anybody who's been involved in helping animals, getting them out of the laboratory, for anybody who's been promoting healthy diets, you can often get the sense that people are aligned against you. We've sometimes had some knockdown, drag-out fights with the National Institutes of Health because, as you know, they give grants for animal experiments like the ones that Ryan Merkley mentioned at Wayne State University. So we've been fighting with them. We've often criticized their policies. Sometimes they, in turn, criticize people who are speaking up for animals. Well, in September, just last month, Christy Sullivan, who is the head of our toxicology programs here at the Physicians Committee, managed to work with the National Institutes of Health and said, let's partner up. And she suggested to them that they have a workshop specifically designed to bring forward new non-animal testing methods. The National Institutes of Health agreed to do this. And starting September 3rd, the workshop began right here in Bethesda, Maryland, just north of Washington, D.C. We had scientists from 21 different countries. Some of them represented industry. Some were from the world of academia. Some were with the federal agencies. Some with various special interest groups. But all of them looked at how animals are used, better ways of doing toxicology that would reduce or ultimately eliminate animal testing. Now, we have a long ways to go with this, but there are two things that I like. One is that the science has matured. We now have really top scientists who are advocating for better methods, both to help the animals, but also because they want science to improve. We've got a real win-win here. The second thing is that we finally have found ways to take to really reach out with other people, the National Institutes of Health, industry, and others, to work together to get the animals out. So I'm feeling a lot of progress there. Before I go on, we have a question, Betsy? Betsy, do we have a question?
Oh, yes, we do. We have Jean Hubbard from Dallas, Texas. Go ahead, Jean. You're on live with Dr. Barnard.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Barnard. I can't help but wonder why, when persons such as yourself speak to these school representatives that continue to conduct the experiments with dogs, what on earth do they say why they continue in light of all of the overwhelming evidence that they're not turning up anything new?
Oh, well, you have a very good heart, and you're thinking about these animals who need care, and it may be hard to imagine that people have a harder heart and who they're not caring about the animals at all. Let me bring Ryan back into this discussion. Ryan Merkley, if we haven't lost you, I want to bring you back into this discussion because I know that you have been in communication with the people at Johns Hopkins and some of these other places. And do you have a sense of what their reaction is to this?
Yeah, I think a critical analysis, sort of the correct way of analyzing all of these experiments, especially when they are basic research experiments like what's going on at Wayne State University with the dogs, is to think of them as properly, and that's how we all probably think about them. What are we getting out of them? What treatments or information are we getting that would help people? Because ostensibly that is the goal of the National Institutes of Health, who fund a lot of these experiments. It is to improve public health, and so we asked that question. Unfortunately, a lot of folks don't think of it the same way. One of the responses we got, in fact, from the funders of the research about the Wayne State dog experiments was, well, we said, here's our 20-page critical analysis of these 2-decade-old experiments. We can't find anything that the public has gotten out of it. And the agency said in a 1-page response that they did an analysis of the research papers that had been published from this work, and found that there was significant citations, which means somebody in the scientific arena cited that paper when they wrote their own paper. And so there's this oft put forth argument that it's building the science, and they are understanding better day by day or year by year, or in this case perhaps decade by decade, mechanisms of heart failure, because they're so focused on a tiny mechanism and not the bigger issue at hand. And frankly, it's something that not only we are criticizing research for, but in other countries and even here, other organizations are saying the same thing. They're saying we need better research metrics. We need a better way of analyzing research than just whether or not. Yeah.
I want to jump in with one other thing. When we were dealing with Johns Hopkins University, and we say, how can you be using animals when other medical schools don't use them? And oddly enough, the argument that they gave in the strongest terms, they said, was that bringing in animals into the laboratory taught them something about the sanctity of life. Mm-hmm. And we said, wait a minute, you used to bring in dogs and kill them, and now you bring in pigs and you kill them too. And somehow that teaches you about the sanctity of life. And I have to say, we found it just ludicrous. To tell you the truth, I really think the issue is tradition. That if they've been doing it, particularly if they get paid for it, they keep doing it and they rationalize. We will ultimately win in both of these cases, I'm sure, and all the others as well. But that's where they're coming from. So anyway, thank you, Ryan, and thank you so much for your question. Do we have another question? And if anybody has a comment or a question, just press 0, and we'll bring you into the call.
So yes, we have a question from Kim in San Diego. Go ahead and ask your question, Kim.
Oh, thank you. I just had a quick question about what can I do basically to support PCRM's effort to stop animal experimentations as a member. How can I help support the efforts?
Oh, bless your hearts. First of all, thank you for your call, Kim, and thank you for all of your support. There are a number of things that you can do. And I'm going to mention some, but Betsy and Ryan, I'm going to ask you to jump in as well and mention things that you're thinking of. The most important thing that occurs to me is we do send out action alerts fairly regularly. And if you are subscribed to them, they will show you things that you can do, places that you can call or write to. And very often that has the strongest effect because these laboratories, like the one at Johns Hopkins, they get worn down if they get criticized enough. So we just have to make sure that we are making enough noise. So please do sign on for our action alerts. Betsy and Ryan, would you like to jump in as well?
Sure. This is Betsy. And I would say, your membership donation goes a really long way to help stop the animal experiments that PCRM is really working on. So thank you for that. It gives us the resources that we need to do this kind of work. And I just would agree with Neil that, by signing up and joining our online community, or when you get a petition, signing it and sending it back, that really does help our campaigns. It's very important.
Great. Thank you. Ryan?
Excuse me. Yeah, and I will third the online community petition point. I mean, you might say, well, there are online petitions for everything, and there people, how effective really are these things? But I'll say from experience that we know that from internal communications we've been able to acquire that these things really do have an impact on the way institutions think about the issue. And every time we give you the opportunity to call as well as email or instead of, I would please do, because those phone calls that not a lot of people unfortunately make go a long way.
One other thing I think is really important, and that's to let your members of Congress know how you feel. We have lobbyists. We're here in Washington. We have lobbyists on Capitol Hill every day. And I'll give you an example. There is a bill in Congress called the Best Practices Act. And the idea is that the best practice of research is not to use animals at all. However, members of Congress always have the same question, and that is, do my constituents really care? So if somebody's representing San Diego, they're thinking, well, the lobbyist might say one thing, but do people back home really care? So if you call your members of Congress and give them a small piece of your mind, that's a really good thing to do. So those are a few things. And also, if you're ever in our neck of the woods, if you come out here to Washington, let us know you're coming, and we can actually go to Capitol Hill along with you, and you can meet your representatives along with us. So thank you for that. By the way, one thing I just wanted to mention really quickly, Betsy said a big thank you to everybody for their financial support, and that does mean an enormous amount. And there's one thing I did want to bring into the discussion. About a week ago, we had a member who is in an ability to do this. He has offered to make an end-of-year match of donations that people are making. And I know that now that it's getting cooler and the end of the year is approaching, everyone is starting to think about their end-of-year giving. This Physicians Committee member, whom I'm mentioning, this year decided to make his biggest match ever. And what that means is that every $1 or $10 or $100 or $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever your donation might be is going to be doubled this year. So let me encourage everybody to think about that. Add an extra zero to whatever you can give to help our work to succeed, and we're very grateful to you for that. Betsy, do we have any other calls? Or otherwise, I have another topic that I want to tackle just real quick.
We do have quite a few questions queued up.
Okay,
so
well, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead.
All right. Diana Blinn from San Antonio, please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Sorry, I'll keep it short because I wanted to move on to the other topic as well. I did the same thing in medical school too. As far as the rat was concerned, I refused to participate in a study that showed that the rat would increase its metabolic activity through the use of cocaine. The instructor got really, really mad at me, but he did not make me do it, and a lot of people didn't say anything after what I said. And my group actually didn't end up doing it, and we all did pass, though he put a few bad remarks. I was just thinking, with Johns Hopkins University, the best way, and I thought this was the best way in my medical school, was if I could get 5 or 6 people that felt the same as me to just complain that they're not going to touch the pigs, they're not going to do it, and the school will listen if enough people will say no. And the medical schools, what they hate, and I learned this over and over again, we will sue you, or we will go to the dean. This is not right. This is not accurate. It may help. It's not going to hurt. What's it going to hurt? You might want to try to get 5 residents in that particular program to say, no, we're not going to do this. And and the second thing with the NIH, I 100% agree with you, because I'm in the Master's Public Health program, and a lot of people from my NIH program, they're the animal experiments. The only reason, and I'm sorry I'm talking so fast, I don't want to waste time, it's due to tradition. They all consider it a necessary evil. They have no idea. I'm sorry to say, they don't have super high IQs. That is just, they apply to the NIH, they get these jobs, and tradition mandates, okay, let's do animals. That's the only way we could do it. So that was real quick. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
Oh,
that was all I had to share.
Bless your heart. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a shining example. The animals were so happy that you made those choices you did. Thank you so much. Betsy, let's take another question.
Neil, let's see. We've got Sheila Gill from Montero, California. Sheila, you're live with Dr. Barnard.
Hi, thank you for being
Okay.
part of the call.
Hi, thanks, Dr. Barnard. I do respond to the action alerts and write letters and phone calls, and I also contribute. But I just want to know on a more basic level, kind of a similar question that you had already. What it is you think, even with the funding that comes in from the National Institute of Health and all of that, it's a two-part question. How do these people, what is your opinion about why the people who are in charge of these programs, who look into the eyes of the animals, can see their pain and their emotion? How are they, like sociopaths? They have no conscience? I just want to know, A, what your opinion is on that, how they can do that, regardless of funding or anything else. And B, my other part of the question is, when contributions are made, is there a board of directors that makes the decisions about where to allocate those funds, or is it all made decisions are made by you? Or I've just always been curious about that too.
Okay, great question. Let me tackle the second one. The Physicians Committee does have a board of directors. It's 5 people. 4 are physicians, and 1 is an attorney. And the board has the ultimate responsibility of the running of the organization. Although I do have to tell you something, which is that I have a very strong hand in what goes on here at the organization, and ever since the beginning, I have pushed as hard as possible to get the animals out of the laboratories. And also, as you know, we have another side of our work too, which is to get animals off of everybody's plates, and that helps the animals. Obviously, it helps people too. So we do have a board. They run the organization. However, I have played a very, very strong role and continue to do that ever since. So I'm happy to tell you that I do not take a salary anymore. A number of years ago, I made the decision that I did not need to get paid for this work anymore, and nobody on the board is salaried at all. So that's our governance. Now, the first question that you asked: how can a researcher look into the eyes of a dog, say at the case of the Wayne State experiments, where they're giving dogs heart failure, and where as many as a quarter of them die before the experiments even begin, just because of all the surgeries they undergo? You're saying, how can an experimenter look in their eyes and do what they do and actually be able to sleep at night? One short answer is that the experimenters don't look into their eyes. The experimenter fills out grant applications, gets money, in this case an enormous amount of money, assigns the work to laboratory technicians who bring in the animals, note down how the animals cry out in pain, put them through the experimental devices, and the experimenter may never even see them in some cases, or see them very, very rarely. And there is something about money coming into a laboratory that makes them hard to say no, makes it hard for them to say no, I'm sorry to say. That, I think, is the short answer. Are some of them sociopaths? They may well be. But I think in many cases it's really just a question of they put up their blinders and they turn a blind eye to what's going on. Let me just bring up 1 or 2 other things in the couple of minutes that we have left. We have a new project going on now. In every laboratory in the world, practically, compounds called antibodies are being used as testing agents. These are protein structures that are used in diagnostic tests. They're used in treatments, all kinds of things. And they are derived in living animals. And the ways that the animals are treated to get these antibodies produced and extracted is really horrible. What I wanted to mention, though, is that it is now possible to make these antibodies and to ship them to every laboratory in the world without using animals at all. It's entirely done in what we call in vitro. We know it's possible. That's not even controversial anymore. The question is, do the new non-animal ones perform as well as the old-fashioned animal ones? We have a scientist on our staff who has begun the process of testing and proving that the non-animal ones are at least as good as the old cruelly derived ones. So I want you to stay tuned. This is not cheap, it's not quick, and it's not easy. But we are proving that, and once we do show that the non-animal methods are as good or even better than the animal ones, then that allows us to go to every laboratory in the world and basically say you have to be using this, because they all are required by law to consider non-animal alternatives to anything that causes pain in an animal, and obviously this does. We expect this project to make the non-animal antibodies, we expect it to bear fruit within the next 12 months, and I'll keep you all posted on that. So I want to thank you so much to everybody for being on the line. We are just coming down to the last couple minutes of the call. If we were not able to take your question, our staffers will certainly be glad to help you. Betsy, do you have some announcements that you want to make before we finish up?
Yes, thank you. We have 2 upcoming fundraising events that, of course, you are all invited, and I want you to know about them. December 9th will be in New York City at the Alexander Gray Gallery. And then on January 24th, we'll be in Los Angeles for a leadership day. And this is a full day where you get to meet the staff and hear them talk firsthand about what they're working on. And we've had 2 of these leadership day events in Washington. People really seem to love it. The staff loves meeting the members, and vice versa. It's been a really good experience. So now we're bringing the show to the West Coast. So please look for emails on both of those events. If you don't have email or you're not signed up on our online community, you can go to our website and click on the About Us tab, and you'll see all of the events listed. So you'll see these events, and you'll see all the schedule of Neil's lectures, everything that we have going on event-wise, we post on that page. So we'd love to have you join us.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Anything else that I forgot to mention, Betsy, that I should be throwing in, or did we cover it?
Well, I know we try to keep these calls to 30 minutes, and I did hear you say that we do have some callers still on the line that we aren't able to get to. So we will have a staff member call you tomorrow, and you'll also have a chance at the very end of the call to leave a message if you'd like one of our staff members to give you a call back, and that'll be tomorrow, and we'll get back to you right away.
Okay, that's great. 2 quick last things then. If you're in the Washington area, I hope you'll give us a call and maybe come by and visit us. I'd love to introduce you to our staffers and have you see our offices. Also, let me give you my direct number. If you have a question for me personally at any time, my number is area code 202-527-7303. That's 202-527-7303. That goes straight to my desk. If you'd rather not talk to me, but you'd like to talk to my assistant, Tara Kemp, her number is 202-527-7314. That's 202-527-7314. And finally, just thank you, Betsy, thanks, Ryan, and thanks to all of you for supporting us as you have. We really appreciate it so much. We have a mission in common, and we're making progress, and we appreciate your help in helping us to get there. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.